Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. The mirror reflected a stranger. Broad shoulders, angular jaw, Adam's apple prominent against a pale throat. Dark stubble shadowed a face that felt alien, disconnected. Fingers trembled as they traced unfamiliar contours, desperately seeking something recognizable beneath the masculine facade. A deep breath shuddered through lungs that felt too large, expanding a chest that was all wrong. Eyes squeezed shut, blocking out the image that felt like a cruel joke. This body was a prison, trapping the essence of who she truly was behind bars of flesh and bone. "Who am I?" The whisper emerged, rough, deep, another betrayal. She cleared her throat, tried again in a higher pitch. "Who am I really?" The answer reverberated through her very being. She was Angie. She had always been Angie, even when the world insisted on calling her Andrew. Her soul, her heart, her deepest self. All of it was fundamentally, unquestionably female. And yet her physical form refused to align with that inner truth. Every glance in the mirror, every "sir" from a stranger, every moment trapped in this male body felt like a lie. A constant, crushing weight of wrongness that threatened to suffocate her true self. Turning away from the mirror, she sank onto the edge of the bathtub. Trembling fingers reached for the pamphlet hidden beneath a stack of towels. She'd read it so many times the creases were worn, threatening to tear. But she needed the reassurance, the promise of possibility contained within those pages. "Male to female gender confirmation surgery," proclaimed the cover. Inside lay diagrams, descriptions, a roadmap to becoming whole, to finally aligning her outer self with her inner truth. It wouldn't be easy. The pamphlet laid out the risks in stark medical terminology: complications, infections, loss of sensation. And beyond the physical toll lay a gauntlet of social, emotional, and financial hurdles. Coming out to family and friends, facing potential rejection and discrimination, the staggering costs of surgery and hormone therapy. But the alternative was unthinkable. To remain trapped in this false form, suffocating her true self day after day, year after year. That slow death of the soul was far more terrifying than any surgical risk. A knock at the bathroom door startled her from her reverie. "You okay in there, son?" Her father's voice, gruff with concern. "You've been awake since dawn." She scrambled to hide the pamphlet, heart racing. "I'm fine, Dad. Just not feeling great. Must have been something I ate." A pause. "All right, let me know if you need anything." Footsteps retreated down the hall. She let out a shaky breath, sagging against the cool porcelain of the tub. The exchange highlighted the chasm between her reality and the perceptions of those around her. Her parents saw their son, their only child, the boy they'd raised for 25 years. They had no idea of the daughter aching to emerge. How could she possibly explain? The words felt inadequate, unable to capture the depth of her struggle. And the fear of their reaction paralyzed her. Would they understand? Accept her? Or would coming out shatter the family forever? She stood, legs unsteady, and faced the mirror once more. This time, she forced herself to really look, to see past the masculine features to the woman yearning to break free. "I see you," she whispered to her reflection. "I know who you really are, and I promise I will find a way to let you out." The vow steadied her, infusing her with resolve. One way or another, she would become her true self. Angie would live, would thrive, would finally be free. With newfound determination, she showered and dressed, choosing her baggiest clothes to minimize her masculine frame. As she headed downstairs, the scent of coffee filled the air. Her mother stood at the stove, spatula in hand as pancakes sizzled. "There's my sleepyhead," she said with a warm smile. "Feeling better?" "A little," she murmured, settling at the kitchen table. Her father glanced up from his newspaper, eyes crinkling with affection. "Nothing some of your mother's pancakes won't cure," he said. "Put some meat on those bones." She forced a wan smile, stomach churning. How many more mornings like this lay ahead? How many more lies of omission, pretending to be the son they thought they knew? As her mother set a steaming plate before her, she made a silent promise. Soon she would find the courage to tell them the truth, to introduce them to their daughter, to Angie. But first, she needed to be sure, to take concrete steps toward transitioning so they would see how serious, how essential this was. After breakfast, she retreated to her room, opening her laptop with trembling fingers. It was time to make an appointment, to speak with professionals who could guide her on this journey. Her search history was already filled with trans resources, support groups, medical information. Now it was time to move beyond research into action. She found a local LGBT health center that offered counseling and hormone therapy. Her cursor hovered over the request appointment button as doubts assailed her. Was she ready for this? What if they told her she wasn't trans enough, that her feelings weren't valid? Taking a deep breath, she clicked. The form appeared, asking for basic information. In the reason for visit field, she hesitated before typing gender identity concerns, interested in transitioning MtF. Seeing the words on screen simultaneously thrilled and terrified her. It was real now, no longer just a secret dream. She was taking the first step toward becoming Angie in truth as well as spirit. The rest of the day passed in a haze of nervous anticipation. She found herself hyper-aware of every masculine aspect of her appearance and behavior, longing to shed them like an ill-fitting costume. At dinner, she picked at her food, mind racing with possibilities and fears. "You're awfully quiet tonight," her mother observed. "Everything okay at work?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. How could she possibly explain that her entire world was on the verge of transformation? That the child they thought they knew was preparing to emerge as someone new and yet, paradoxically, as her truest self? "Just tired," she managed. "Think I might turn in early." Her father's brow furrowed with concern. "You've seemed off lately, son. You know you can talk to us about anything, right?" The words lodged in her throat. Part of her longed to blurt out the truth, to unburden herself of this overwhelming secret. But fear held her back. Fear of rejection, of disappointment, of shattering the family's peace. "I know, Dad," she said softly. "I'm okay, really. Just figuring some things out." It wasn't a lie, not exactly, but the weight of everything left unsaid hung heavy between them. That night, sleep proved elusive. She tossed and turned, mind racing with visions of the future. She imagined herself with softer features, curves in place of angles. She pictured walking down the street, confident and at ease in her own skin, no longer feeling like an imposter in her own life. But darker images intruded as well. The potential pain and complications of surgery, the prospect of losing family and friends who couldn't accept her truth, the daily challenges of navigating a world that could be cruel to those who defied gender norms. Yet even in the face of those fears, a sense of rightness persisted. This was her path, her truth. Whatever obstacles lay ahead, facing them as her authentic self was infinitely preferable to suffocating her true nature any longer. As dawn broke, she rose, exhausted but oddly energized. Today marked the beginning of her journey toward wholeness. Whatever happened, she would face it as Angie, the woman she had always been inside, finally taking steps to align her outer self with her inner truth. She dressed with care, choosing her most androgynous outfit. As she applied a touch of concealer to hide the shadow of stubble, her hand trembled slightly. It was a small act of femininity, barely noticeable to others, but to her it felt like a silent declaration, a tiny step toward embodying her true self. The day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. At work, she found it hard to focus, her mind constantly drifting to the appointment that awaited her. Every interaction felt charged with new meaning. Did her colleagues see her as just another guy? Could they sense the woman yearning to break free? When 5 o'clock finally arrived, she rushed out, heart pounding. The LGBT health center was across town, and she didn't want to be late. As she navigated traffic, doubt crept in. Was she really ready for this? What if the counselor didn't believe her, didn't think she was trans enough? She forced those fears aside as she parked, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "You can do this," she whispered, meeting her own eyes in the rearview mirror. "This is who you are. This is the first step toward becoming whole." The waiting room was warm and inviting, walls adorned with rainbow flags and affirming posters. She fidgeted in her seat, hyper-aware of every masculine aspect of her appearance. A part of her wanted to apologize, to explain that this wasn't her true form, that the woman inside was aching to emerge. "Andrew," the receptionist called, and she flinched at the name. Soon, she promised herself, soon she would shed that ill-fitting label forever. The counselor, Dr. Patel, had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "What brings you in today?" she asked, her voice warm and non-judgmental. For a moment, words failed. How could she possibly articulate the lifetime of disconnect, of feeling trapped in the wrong form? But as she began to speak, hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction, it all came pouring out. The childhood sense of difference, the desperate attempts to conform, the growing realization that she was meant to be a woman. Dr. Patel listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions without ever making her feel judged or doubted. By the end of the session, tears streamed down her face, not from sorrow, but from the profound relief of finally giving voice to her truth. "Thank you for sharing your story," Dr. Patel said softly. "It takes immense courage to be honest about who you are, especially when it goes against societal expectations. I want you to know that your feelings are valid and that there are options available to help you align your outer self with your inner truth." They discussed next steps: continued counseling, the possibility of hormone therapy, resources for coming out to loved ones. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. For the first time, she felt truly seen, truly understood. The path ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer alone on the journey. As she left the health center, the world seemed somehow brighter. She was Angie, and she was taking the first steps toward fully embodying that truth. The road ahead would be long and often difficult, but it led toward wholeness, toward finally feeling at home in her own skin. That night, as she prepared for bed, she paused before the mirror. The reflection was still undeniably masculine, but now she could see beyond those surface features. She saw the woman within, waiting to emerge, and for the first time in years, she smiled at her reflection. A genuine smile, full of hope and possibility. "Hello, Angie," she whispered. "I can't wait to meet you properly." The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotion and activity. She dove into research, devouring everything she could find about the transition process. Hormone therapy, voice training, surgery options, each new piece of information both thrilled and terrified her. The possibilities were endless, but so too were the potential complications and challenges. She began experimenting in small ways, painting her toenails and wearing feminine underwear beneath her masculine clothes. Each tiny act of self-expression felt like a victory, a step toward embodying her true self. But they also heightened her awareness of how much farther she had to go. The mirror remained a source of both fascination and frustration. She found herself studying her features obsessively, imagining how hormone therapy might soften her jaw, redistribute fat to create curves. She practiced makeup in secret, marveling at how a touch of eyeshadow or lipstick could transform her appearance. But those moments of gender euphoria were often followed by crushing dysphoria. No amount of concealer could fully hide her stubble. Her broad shoulders and flat chest felt like a betrayal, a constant reminder of the disconnect between her inner self and outer form. Coming out to her best friend, Michael, was both terrifying and liberating. They'd known each other since childhood, sharing countless milestones and secrets. But this felt different, more monumental than anything that had come before. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, voice shaking. They were sitting in Michael's living room, pizza growing cold between them. It's big, and I'm scared it might change things between us." Michael's brow furrowed with concern. "You know you can tell me anything, right? Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." She took a deep breath, steeling herself. I'm transgender. I'm a woman. I know I don't look like it yet, but inside that's who I've always been, and I'm starting to take steps to transition, to become who I truly am." For a long moment, Michael was silent. She held her breath, terrified of rejection, but then strong arms enveloped her in a fierce hug. "Thank you for trusting me with this," Michael said, voice thick with emotion. "I can't pretend I understand everything about what you're going through, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. Whatever you need, however I can support you, I've got your back." Tears flowed freely as relief washed over her. She hadn't lost her best friend. If anything, their bond felt stronger now, forged in the crucible of vulnerability and acceptance. "So," Michael said as they pulled apart, wiping away his own tears, "do you have a name picked out? Something you'd like me to call you?" She smiled tremulously. "Angie. My name is Angie." "It's nice to meet you, Angie," Michael replied with a grin. "Now, how about we reheat this pizza and you can tell me all about your plans? I want to know everything." As they talked late into the night, Angie felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she could speak freely about her hopes and fears, her dreams for the future. Michael listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and offering unwavering support. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. There were moments of awkwardness as Michael adjusted to using her new name and pronouns, but his sincere effort and genuine acceptance meant the world to her. Coming out to Michael gave her a desperately needed ally, someone to lean on as she navigated the complexities of transition. But it also threw into sharp relief the looming challenge of telling her parents. The thought filled her with paralyzing fear. What if they reacted with disgust or rejection? What if they refused to accept her as their daughter? The possibility of losing her family, of shattering the relationships that had defined her life, was almost too much to bear. Yet she knew she couldn't hide forever. The hormones would soon begin to work their magic, slowly but inexorably transforming her body. And more than that, she longed to be truly seen and accepted by those who had loved her all her life. As she stood before the mirror, practicing the words she would say, Angie felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. Whatever happened, she was taking control of her destiny. She was choosing authenticity over fear, truth over comfort. "Mom, Dad," she whispered to her reflection, "there's something I need to tell you. I'm your daughter. I always have been." The words hung in the air, a promise and a challenge. Tomorrow, she vowed, she would speak them aloud. Tomorrow, she would introduce her parents to Angie, to the woman she had always been, finally ready to step into the light. The morning dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil roiling within Angie. She'd barely slept, rehearsing her speech over and over in her mind. Today was the day. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending. As she dressed, she chose her outfit with care, a soft sweater and jeans that subtly hinted at femininity without being overt. She applied a touch of tinted lip balm, hands trembling slightly. It wasn't much, but it felt like armor against the storm to come. Downstairs, her parents were already at the breakfast table. Her mother looked up with a warm smile that twisted Angie's heart. How would that smile change once she knew the truth? "Good morning, sweetheart," her mother said. "You're up early for a Saturday." Angie nodded, throat tight. I need to talk to you both. It's important." Her father set down his newspaper, brow furrowing with concern. "Everything okay, son?" The word son felt like a physical blow, but Angie steeled herself. This was it. No turning back now. "Actually, that's part of what I need to tell you." She took a deep breath, willing her voice not to shake. "I'm not your son. I'm your daughter. I'm transgender." The silence that followed was deafening. Her mother's fork clattered to her plate. Her father's face went blank with shock. "I know this is a lot to take in," Angie continued, words tumbling out in a rush. "But I've felt this way my whole life. I've always known deep down that I was meant to be a woman. I've started seeing a therapist, and I'm planning to begin hormone therapy soon. I hope you can try to understand, to accept me for who I really am." Her mother was the first to speak, voice barely above a whisper. "But how? You never showed any signs. You were always such a normal little boy." Angie felt a flash of frustration. "I tried so hard to be what everyone expected, to fit in, but it was killing me inside. This is who I am, who I've always been. I just couldn't hide it anymore." Her father stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Without a word, he walked out of the room. The sound of the front door slamming made Angie flinch. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to her mother. "Mom, please, say something." Her mother's face crumpled. "I don't understand. How could you do this to us? What will people think?" The words cut deep, but Angie forced herself to remain calm. "This isn't about other people, Mom. It's about me finally being true to myself. I'm still the same person inside. I still love you both so much. I need you to see me for who I really am." Her mother shook her head, rising from the table. "I can't. I need some time. This is too much." As her mother retreated upstairs, Angie sank into a chair, body shaking with suppressed sobs. It had gone even worse than she'd feared. The rejection, the incomprehension, it threatened to crush her beneath its weight. But beneath the pain, a tiny spark of relief flickered. The truth was out now. There was no going back, but there was also no more hiding. Whatever happened next, she would face it as her authentic self. Hours passed in a haze of tension and silence. Angie retreated to her room, alternating between bouts of tears and frantic texts to Michael, seeking reassurance and support. Her parents remained sequestered in their bedroom, muffled voices occasionally rising in what sounded like heated debate. As evening fell, a soft knock at her door startled Angie from her misery. Her mother stood in the doorway, eyes red-rimmed but calm. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. Angie nodded, heart pounding. Her mother perched on the edge of the bed, hands twisting in her lap. "I won't pretend I understand all of this," she began. It's a lot to take in. But I've been thinking and talking with your father, and I need you to know that we love you, no matter what. You're our child, and that will never change." Fresh tears spilled down Angie's cheeks, but this time from a surge of overwhelming relief. "Oh, Mom," she whispered. Her mother reached out, clasping Angie's hand. "We're going to need time to adjust, to learn, and I can't promise we won't make mistakes, but we want to try, to support you however we can." Angie threw her arms around her mother, clinging tightly as sobs racked her body. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, truly accepted. "Thank you," she managed between tears. "Thank you so much." Her mother stroked her hair, her own voice thick with emotion. "Your father, he's still processing, but he'll come around. He loves you too much not to." As they held each other, Angie felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The road ahead would still be challenging, filled with obstacles both physical and emotional. But she was no longer walking it alone. She had her family's love, imperfect but enduring. She had friends who accepted her for who she truly was, and most importantly, she had herself, her true self, finally free to emerge into the light. In the days and weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. There were awkward moments as her parents adjusted to using her new name and pronouns. Her father remained more distant, struggling to reconcile the son he thought he knew with the daughter now before him. But he was trying, in his own way, attending a support group for parents of transgender children and asking hesitant questions about her transition plans. Angie began hormone therapy, marveling at each subtle change in her body and emotions. She experimented with clothing and makeup, reveling in the freedom to express her true self. The first time she went out in public presenting fully as a woman was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. There were setbacks, of course. Not everyone in her life was as accepting as Michael and her parents. She lost some friends, faced discrimination at work, and endured stares and whispers from strangers. The dysphoria still hit hard some days when her reflection didn't quite match the woman she knew herself to be. But through it all, Angie held on to the knowledge that she was finally living authentically. Each step of her transition, whether medical, social, or legal, brought her closer to aligning her outer self with her inner truth. 1 year to the day after coming out to her parents, Angie stood before the mirror once more. The changes were subtle but profound. Softer skin, the beginning of curves, facial features slowly feminizing. But the most striking transformation was in her eyes. Gone was the haunted, trapped look of before. In its place shone a quiet confidence, a sense of finally being at home in her own skin. "Hello, Angie," she whispered to her reflection, lips curving in a genuine smile. "It's so good to finally meet you." The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But Angie faced the future with hope and determination. She was becoming who she was always meant to be, one day at a time, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely alive. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.